Okay, so you want to own a bakery chain. Your name in cursive script above the door, a glass case of pastries people photograph before they eat, the local morning show stopping by for a segment. Maybe a best bakery in town plaque behind the register that nobody in the croissant line ever actually reads. Here's what's actually going on underneath that idea. In 2022, one viral cookie chain topped $1 billion in nationwide system sales. Genuinely explosive, headline-grabbing growth. The next year, average profit per store fell by more than 58%. Wait, what? A chain can look like the biggest success story in the industry at the system level, while the actual stores underneath it are quietly bleeding money. So, why does anyone do this? Instant local fame, a shot at real social media virality, weddings and events that pay premium rates for custom work no grocery store can replicate. That's the honest, partial answer. What it costs to build something bigger than one storefront is where the story turns. First, you need permission, and not from one office, but from two tracks that don't always overlap. Your local health department has to license your kitchen as a retail food establishment. If you ever want to sell into grocery stores or ship products out of state, you need a completely separate wholesale food manufacturing license with its own inspection standards and its own paperwork. And the capital required escalates fast. A genuine commercial retail bakery, the kind with real ovens and real seating, typically runs $100,000 to $400,000 to open. Buy into an established brand instead, and the numbers climb further. One major cookie franchise's total initial investment runs $816,000 to over $1.4 million before a single cookie is sold. And here's a rule most people don't know about. Most states have what's called a cottage food law, letting you legally bake and sell from your home kitchen with minimal oversight. Here's the catch. Those laws almost always cap your annual sales at somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000, and they typically ban you from selling anything requiring refrigeration, like a cream-filled pastry at all. The low-cost bakery dream has a hard ceiling built directly into the law before you've rented a single square foot. You also need people, real, specific, sometimes legally mandated people. Every kitchen needs a certified food safety manager on staff. Federal law requires every major allergen in every product to be clearly declared. And skilled cake decorators, the people who can actually execute a wedding cake order, command real premium wages precisely because that specific skill can't be taught in an afternoon. So that's the entry fee, just to legally exist. Now let's talk about the actual product, the ovens, mixers, and proofers, because here almost everyone runs into the same quiet bottleneck. The entire American baking industry sources its core ingredient, flour, from a small handful of massive milling companies, meaning your recipe's most basic input is priced by a market you have zero influence over. And here's the first trap. The Start Your Bakery for $15,000. Numbers you see online are almost never what a real commercial build-out actually costs. Construction and leasehold improvements alone typically eat 40 to 50% of your total budget, with commercial-grade equipment eating another 25 to 35% on top of that. Move from a home mixer to a genuine commercial kitchen, and the numbers get considerably more painful. A single commercial reach-in oven, a walk-in cooler, and a dough proofer can each run into the tens of thousands of dollars, and a serious bakery chain needs multiples of every single one of those, in every single location. Here's where the first real decision point shows up. Do you bake everything fresh inside each individual storefront, or do you build one central commissary kitchen and distribute out to multiple smaller retail locations? A central commissary model concentrates your equipment cost into one heavily built kitchen, then ships product out daily to storefronts that need far less equipment themselves, cheaper to open new locations, but you're now betting your entire chain's freshness and food safety on one facility and one delivery schedule. Baking fresh in every location costs more upfront per store, but nothing depends on a single point of failure. There's also a clever revenue trick some growing bakeries use. Selling product wholesale into grocery store shelves, sometimes under a private label rather than your own name. It's completely legal, extremely common once a brand has scale, and it can add serious volume fast. It also means giving up meaningful margin per unit and, in the private label version, giving up your actual brand recognition on the product entirely. So now you've got a kitchen model and a wholesale option on the table. Time to pick a business model because bakery chain isn't one business, it's at least three completely different ones. The traditional retail model is what most people picture, one or several storefronts, each baking fresh, each living or dying on foot traffic and repeat local customers. Highest control, highest per location cost, and your revenue ceiling is capped by how many people physically walk through your door. Then there's the central commissary plus storefronts model, where a single production facility supplies multiple smaller retail points. Lower build-out cost per new location and faster expansion at the cost of everything running through one kitchen's capacity and one delivery van's schedule. And there's the wholesale and grocery distribution model, where your product line lives primarily on someone else's shelves. Massive volume potential with none of the retail foot traffic dependency, but you're now a supplier to a retailer with far more negotiating leverage than you have, and they can drop your line whenever their own numbers say to. This brings us to one of the strangest hidden assets in the entire industry, the brand name itself, once it's famous enough to license. A bakery whose name alone can move product on a grocery shelf, a packaged mix, a branded gift box, a licensing deal, has built something worth more than any single oven or storefront, a name people will pay a premium for, completely independent of who's actually baking that day. Now, let's get into the costs that actually eat your revenue every single day. This is where most people's mental math falls apart. Ingredients and packaging typically run 20 to 40% of revenue, and baked goods are one of the most genuinely perishable products in retail. Unlike a restaurant meal you can plate to order, a tray of pastries you don't sell today is very often worth nothing tomorrow. Labor is the single biggest recurring cost, and bakery labor carries a brutal schedule most customers never think about. Lead bakers commonly start their shift between 2 and 4 in the morning, hours before the first customer walks in, to have product ready by opening, a grueling, unglamorous reality behind every warm croissant in the case. And there's a genuine injustice buried in this industry's recent history that deserves a moment. In 2022, federal regulators found child labor violations at 11 locations of one major cookie chain across 6 states. 46 minors found operating industrial ovens running as hot as 900 degrees and commercial dough mixers, equipment that should never have been anywhere near an underage employee in the first place. Ingredients are the second biggest cost, and they're where volatility genuinely lives. Butter, sugar, and chocolate all move on global commodity cycles completely outside your control, but eggs, in particular, have been brutal. Driven by an ongoing avian flu outbreak, the average price of a dozen eggs in the United States jumped from around $2.50 in early 2024 to nearly $5 by early 2025, and one bakery owner reported the wholesale cost of a single bucket of pre-beaten eggs surging 345% in just over a year. When your core ingredient does that, there's no clever hedge that fully protects you. One cookie company tried something completely unusual for its industry, and it paid off in a way nobody expected. In the 1980s, Mrs. Fields Cookies installed a networked computer system in every single store, one that calculated exactly how much cookie dough to mix, hour by hour, based on real sales data, to minimize unsold leftovers. It was considered strange for a cookie company to be this obsessed with software. That system became so valuable it spun off into its own standalone company, which still trades publicly today, a piece of a cookie chain that ultimately became more durable than the cookies themselves. Maintenance in a bakery is an unforgiving clock. A single overnight oven failure doesn't just cost a repair bill. It can mean opening the next morning with an empty display case because, unlike most retail businesses, you can't just restock from a warehouse. You have to physically remake everything, starting from 0 hours behind schedule. And refrigeration and proofing systems are their own recurring gulf. A failed walk-in cooler compressor can spoil an entire batch of perishable dairy and egg-based ingredients overnight, and humidity-controlled proofing environments need HVAC systems precise enough that a malfunction can ruin an entire day's dough before a single tray goes in the oven. Then there's insurance, general liability, property, and increasingly, allergen liability coverage, given how serious a mislabeled allergen can be for a customer. And like every corner of the food business, bakeries chase savings in places that look almost comically small on their own. Shaving a fraction of an ounce of butter off a recipe trimming packaging size by a few millimeters, trivial per unit, but multiplied across thousands of pastries sold a week, it adds up to real money by the end of the quarter. So, that's the cost side. Now, let's talk about how you actually make money back, because this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. A pastry in a display case is one of the most perishable products in all of retail. It has to sell today, in this exact form, or it's often worth close to nothing tomorrow. That extreme perishability is exactly why so many bakeries now partner with surplus food apps to sell end-of-day inventory at a steep discount rather than throw it away entirely. And the display case itself is engineered, deliberately, the same way a menu is, the highest margin item placed at eye level, bundling a pastry with a coffee to lift the average ticket, limited edition flavors rotated weekly to manufacture urgency. You've been nudged at the bakery counter more times than you probably realize. The break-even math behind all of this is brutal. With ingredients and labor commonly eating 50 to 70% of revenue combined before rent, utilities, or a single loan payment, a bakery has to hit a genuinely high daily unit volume just to break even, which is exactly why industry-wide net margins routinely land in the single digits, even at busy, well-loved locations. Beneath the daily case sales, ancillary revenue matters enormously. Custom wedding and celebration cakes carry some of the highest margins in the entire business, precisely because that specific skill is scarce, and catering contracts and branded retail packaged goods both add income streams a walk-in customer alone could never generate. But here's the part almost nobody outside the industry understands, and it's the single most important structural fact in the entire business. For a chain built on franchising, the company's own profit and an individual store owner's profit are not the same number, and they don't move together. That same cookie chain collects roughly 10% of every franchisee's gross sales in combined royalty and marketing fees, money that gets paid whether that specific store is thriving or barely surviving. In 2024, only about 43% of that chain's locations generated above-average profit. The worst-performing store in the system lost over $241,000 in a single year, while the company's own franchise fees kept flowing in regardless. In a very real sense, a franchised bakery chain earning steady royalty income from thousands of storefronts has become something closer to a licensing and marketing company that happens to sell pastries, while the actual financial risk of flour, eggs, and 4-in-the-morning labor sits almost entirely with the individual franchisee standing behind the counter. Now for the volatility. That same cookie chain's average unit volume swung from $1.8 million in 2022, down 37% to $1.16 million in 2023, up 17% to $1.4 million in 2024, then down 16% again in 2025, a genuine roller coaster inside a single, still growing national brand. And a strong brand doesn't protect individual operators from that swing. Franchisee satisfaction surveys for that same chain have registered as low as 1.7 out of 5, a brand that can dominate a category in total sales while a meaningful share of the people actually running its stores are deeply unhappy with what they're taking home. That cookie chain is also the clearest recent example of what happens when viral growth outruns structural discipline. The company opened new locations at a pace of nearly one a day at its peak, chasing demand generated almost entirely by social media attention. When engagement on its own weekly flavor announcement videos collapsed from over 150,000 likes to under 40,000 within a few years, the foot traffic that had justified all that expansion cooled right along with it. A stark reminder that virality is not the same thing as a durable customer base, no matter how fast the store count grows. Cancellations pile onto this volatility in a way few first-time bakery owners appreciate. A canceled custom wedding cake order, sometimes with only days of notice, leaves a bakery holding hours of specialized decorator labor and a highly customized product that literally cannot be resold to anyone else. Regulatory and ingredient shift costs are the newest volatility factor on the list. Rising demand for gluten-free and allergen-conscious products has pushed many bakeries towards specialty ingredients that can cost meaningfully more than standard flour and sugar, alongside stricter allergen labeling requirements that add real compliance overhead to every single recipe on the menu. So, let's run two scenarios. In the optimistic one, You build a genuinely loved local concept, layer in high-margin custom cake orders and catering, and either stay disciplined at a small multi-unit scale or franchise carefully enough that your own royalty income doesn't depend on any single store's daily grind. In the realistic one, you scale on the back of a viral moment that fades faster than your lease terms do, carrying fixed costs across locations that were never proven at the unit economics level in the first place. The way it played out for the industry's most talked about cookie chain, whose weakest store lost close to $250,000 in a single year. So, if you still want to own a bakery chain, understand exactly what you're actually buying. Not really a warm room full of pastries with your name over the door. What you're buying is a business built on a genuinely perishable product, 4 in-the-morning labor, and ingredient costs you don't control. One that only becomes real, durable wealth the moment your name is worth more on a shelf than the flour, sugar, and eggs baked into everything underneath it.